Welcome to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. Each week, Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Landi explore the moments, questions, and ideas that shape who we are and who we aspire to be. And now for this week's conversation.
Welcome back to the In Such a Time podcast. And Rabbi, you and I today, I think, are going to talk about something that's been on our minds and a lot of those of the Jewish community, and that is the rhetoric coming out of the mayoral office in New York City and the effect upon the Jewish community and ways that we should be responding to this. So should we perhaps take a second and just sort of just review what's been said?
Would you like to?
Sure. I think that what most comes to light are actually within about a less than 48-hour span of time. There was a direct video that was made about Netanyahu's upcoming visit to New York and threatening to arrest Netanyahu and to accuse Israel of genocide and Netanyahu as a war criminal, and just to again and again repeat so many of the libels that are cast against Israel and Jewish supporters of Israel. And then to the very next day, turn around and to offer a message not supporting, of care and comfort to the Jews on this day of Tisha B'Av, the day that's commemorates the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, which is just so completely tone deaf, or even, do we say it's even, even more insulting to have a message like that come on the heels of such a divisive, such an irresponsible message to be given the day before. So that's what I largely have in mind.
For the stabbings in
And as a result,
and
yes,
he responded to that as well. I'm feeling a lot of whiplash from the Mamdani administration at the moment. I'm feeling we've talked about this previously about how the Mamdani administration has said explicitly that they are not anti-Semitic. They have a problem with a certain administration, with a certain kind of political view in Israel. And that was a satisfying answer for a while, I think, for some Jews, for some Israelis. Not for you.
If you say so.
No, I'm saying, I just said for some,
Yeah.
definitely not you. And I think that certain people, including myself, were really hoping that the Mamdani administration, which came out so many times and said, we have difference of opinion, but we are not anti-Semitic, and then brought in a lot of Jews into the administration who, as you would say, and I didn't like this at first, and now I'm maybe getting on board with your idea that they're the good kind of Jews who give them the kind who speak the language that they're speaking. But after he got up and made the statement about Benjamin Netanyahu and the desire to have him arrested, which is out of his jurisdiction completely, for being a war criminal. And I hate Benjamin Netanyahu. I hate him. Truly, I think he's done terrible things for the Jewish people and for Israel. But the way that Mamdani spoke, he had a look in his eyes. He said it in a way that he gave no doubt to the fact that this wasn't just about Benjamin Netanyahu, but this was about Israel. And I think he perpetuated in his statement, and I don't say this lightly, I'm highly disturbed by this. He perpetuated blood libel in a very real way. He perpetuated tropes that have been haunting the Jewish people for centuries. And I came away that day after he spoke feeling so betrayed, personally devastated, because I knew deep in my heart that he probably wasn't a friend of, he probably wasn't the ally that I hoped that he would be, but I hope that he'd be a little bit more than he was. And so I'm feeling, and it's not just feeling, I'm as Leora, not as a rabbi right now, as Leora, I'm upset, I'm betrayed, I'm terrified of his rhetoric. And in a second, I'll talk about what I feel as a Jewish leader, which I think is a little bit different.
So not to put you on the spot here,
You
but
can.
hearing the way you react to it, the first, I guess, one quality that arises in my head is, were you being perhaps a bit naive? I mean, let
Yeah,
me just make
I hear
this
you.
is a man who has built his entire political career on demonizing Israel. This is someone who began their student activism by founding the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter at Bowdoin. This is not about Students for Justice in Palestine, about critiquing Israeli policy. This is about critiquing Israeli existence and calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. This is in all of his rhetoric years leading up to his mayoral win, talking about the boots of the
The idea.
police being laced by the IDF, looking at his social media posts about Israel, looking at what his wife has posted and agreed with online, some of the most heinous tropes about Jews as baby killers, organ harvesters, apartheid, genocide, you name it. This is what he said the other day is nothing new. And in fact, I guess one question that I would ask is, should we be paying attention to what he has to say? And I want to say as a full disclaimer, I don't listen to what he has to say. I saw all of the responses. I did not listen to his statement. I don't care to give him 1 ounce of my attention and time. And I think that pragmatically, part of the question I want to ask today is also around, can we just ignore this, or is this Haman in Shushan, wringing the hand, and that we have to be careful and have to be very cognizant and push back against what he says?
Well, okay, so here's what I feel about this. It's that I can be naive. I don't think I was naive. I think that there were enough Jewish leaders that met with him that tried to reassure us Jewish leaders, us rabbis, that he is surrounding himself with people who are making good decisions for the Jewish people. And that was Mamdani of the past, and now he's a mayor for the people. And when people with credibility who I trust say that, I want to believe them. However, when someone says something and is explicit about what they say, you should believe what they say.
Mhm.
And I know that. So I don't believe that I'm naive. I believe that I gave him a chance, a real chance. And I think that a lot of my liberal progressive values are on the cusp of things that he stands for. I feel completely out of that camp at this point. I feel completely ostracized from whatever that is. I don't think that I've said I feel politically homeless, which is a whole nother,
As many of us do.
as many of us do. But like I say this often here. I'm often late to the party, so I process things. I process things when I process them, and I feel that now. Um, that's number one. Number two is that I think that we have to listen to him because so many young Jews see him to be a hero. And I was having this discussion. I was at my children's camp this weekend, which is a Zionist camp. Um, and I was really interested by how they were teaching Zionism, really like from 1967 kind of perspective, like, you know, we're proud of Israel, look at us. And I was thinking, this is so beautiful in a lot of ways. And I was raised in this, and that's why I became a Zionist. And it's also completely tone deaf to the moment because when these kids go out into the world, they're going to have to deal with other Jews and other people who are not charmed by Israel the way that they are. And they need to be able to be ready to have conversation about the antagonism towards Israel. They can't just come at it with pride. They have to come at it with nuance.
But aren't you assuming that what you saw them receiving at Sprout Camp is the sum total? And don't you think that as they grow older, that there are opportunities for them to learn a more nuanced, more complex understanding of Israel?
I agree. However, all the movements of the anti-Zionism came out, a lot of them came out of the youth groups, the Zionist youth groups, what they would call propaganda youth groups. I wouldn't call them that, but that's, if not now, for instance, JVP, they came out, they said, why did we not know that we were being indoctrinated? I mean, all education is teaching somebody something and hoping that they develop and grow later on. I'm what I'm saying is that we have to see Mamdani and the likes as people who are not going to go away, but as people that we need to be able to be in fierce and educated and thoughtful conversation with them, but knowing what we stand for and also knowing that they are wrapped up in my opinion, dangerous tropes.
So I have a couple responses. First is, I think there's nothing surprising about what Mamdani said last week because he didn't say anything that he hasn't said before. I think what might be surprising is you think usually that when politicians get elected, the mantra is that now I'm going to be a politician for all of my constituents. I ran on a certain platform, but now I'm going to represent all my constituents. And ideally, that person is then going to moderate when they are now serving the general populace. I would say that in the current environment in which anti-Israel sentiment is not a outside, unimportant factor of political identity, but within the far, far left is the factor for political identity, right? Again, we talked about Brad Lander and his ascent and why Dan Goldman lost with the exact same platform. The only thing that Dan Goldman wouldn't give them are libels such as genocide. And so in the moment, there is a political incentive to continue in the least moderate way, and so you have someone like Mamdani who is continuing to just rage ahead with just as much of that fervor. And I think we're seeing throughout the country, one of the scary things is that that fervor is working to political advantage throughout races throughout the country. And that goes as well, by the way, for the far right and for the very dangerous people making terrible comments like the J.D. Vances or the Tucker Carlsons of the world. I don't think this is on one side of the aisle necessarily. And so I think that we're in a moment in which A, um, outrage outweighs sort of a more of a split perspective. People are engaged by that sort of rage. And I think that second of all, that our political leaders overwhelmingly are less judged or less motivated by what they can actually accomplish in the legal system and more with their clicks and their likes and their branding and their message. And in that end, it doesn't even really matter what actual laws you get passed. What really matters is the vibe that you put out onto social media. And then I worry about those people who are then swayed by that.
I'm worried more than outside of the Jewish world. I mean, and I am in conversation with outside the Jewish world. I'm a human that interacts with other
Yeah.
humans and that I have a universalist element to my being. I'm worried about the Jews who are moved by what he says. I'm worried about a whole generation of young Jews um, who don't see themselves as part of the Jewish people, who don't see um, or Dafka, like specifically, do see themselves as part of the Jewish people, and that this is now the new legacy that we call ourselves out, even if it's not true, or even if it puts us in danger, for the sake of being accepted by the greater good.
Again, this is nothing new either.
It's nothing new, but it's happening now. And I think that it wasn't happening 3 years ago. And so it's disturbing.
There were Jews that attended the Madison Square Garden rally for Nazis in the 1930s. There's Pablo Cristiano you talked about, and the Jews who converted to Christianity and then attacked fellow Jews and used it in order to bring Jews to trial and burn the Talmud and such. That there's always been
Yeah.
the decision made that if you would like to turn your back against your Jewish brethren, there's an opportunity for you there and a short-term advantage for you there. And I think that we are a small people, and one of the reasons why is because in every generation there are those who have fallen aside because they feel as though the Jewish endeavor is no longer worth their time or worth their or is beneath them.
I think it's different now. I think that they think that that this is the Jewish mission.
It's altruistic.
It's altruistic.
It's righteousness.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yes. I, Rabbi Jaffe, I know that basically every podcast we've had till now has been about this subject, and you've been making the argument exactly for what we're saying right now. And only right now I'm like catching up. I understand that, but like, you know, this is existential. This is about like I'm in this moment and highly disturbed because people who I see as Jewish leaders, I think are doing so much damage to the Jewish people right now.
First of all, I hopefully we've talked about a couple other things than this. And second, so can I offer you my view as a Jewish pessimist? Yeah.
I've been waiting for.
Ben, so I think that I was listening to an interesting speech by Judge Roy Altman. Roy Altman's a federal judge. He has a book out that's called Israel on Trial, where he takes all of these different libels and basically one by one, from a very like professional legal perspective, analyzes them and ultimately will debunk each one of these libels. And he said in his work, he talks to a lot of non-Jews, especially a lot of non-Jewish judges that he's in contact with. He said that basically, if he could map out the spectrum, he would say that there's about 10% of Americans who really, really, really hate Israel, who really think that Israel is all of the terrible things that people have to say, and that the world would be better if Israel wiped off the map. He said there's probably around 30% of Americans who think favorably or overall favorably towards Israel. And he'll say that interestingly enough, Jews are some of those, but it's much more Catholics, Protestants, born again evangelicals that who really see Israel as part of their spiritual mission as well.
Totally.
And then you have about another 60%. And the other 60%, he says, doesn't really care so much. Like, Israel's not their issue. It's not a big deal. They're much more interested in putting food on the table, getting good jobs, education, healthcare, all the things that we would normally think about. And the problem he would say is that the 10% have been very loud and been very focused on putting their message out to the 60%, while the other 30% really haven't. And I think that's kind of what you're saying right here is, oh my God, Jews are joining that 10%. And you're worried about what's gonna happen to the 60%. And I guess this is my pessimist view here. If the 60% of Americans who really are not connected to this, if they fall sway to the 10%, they will be just like every other society in every other moment of Jewish history. And that ultimately it'll be a failure of critical thinking to hear the constant propaganda, the Mamdani messages, the propaganda that comes from social media from your phone again and again and again, repeating the same lies again and again and again. And I guess that I worry that whenever there is a country that turns against their Jews, it is always because that country can no longer take acceptance of their own failures and their own challenges and need just to scapegoat someone else. And it's for that reason that every time the Jews have been kicked out of a country or demonized in a country, that country has perished or has gone down afterwards. And the Jews ultimately find their way and are going to be okay. So I guess what I'm saying is when I see what Mamdani is saying and I see this being put out into the aether for people to either accept or reject, I think it's a real test of Americans. I think it's a real test of Americans to do we still in 2026 have the critical thinking to hear a lie being repeated again and again and again and to say no or to call them out. And I'm not sure if in our modern era of lower rates of literacy, lower rates of being open to other perspectives, lower rates of being in touch with people with other perspectives,
higher rates of isolation in social media.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is I'm worried more about Americans than I am worried about the Jews.
Okay, well, now I'm worried about all of us.
No, I mean this is
No.
this is how a country dies. This is how a democracy dies, is when people no longer are able to critically think and analyze different messages being said to them, look at the proof, understand the history, have the education, have the literacy around these things. Because I firmly believe that if you read and understand the history of this part of the world and of the Jewish people, you do not have to be a Netanyahu fan. You do not, right? You do not have to be like a strong Zionist to make that your main claim. But to say that, it seems like the Jews have a bit of an indigenous claim to this land, and that maybe there should be space for them to live here too. I think that that is a basic outcome of critical thinking. And if that our citizens can't pass that basic test, I worry more about the country and its future overall.
I'm completely with you here. I think We are absolutely in a moment where there is no nuance, where people think so vehemently that they know what the truth is. And you can't tell me otherwise. I know with my own eyes that this is happening. And if we don't stand up for it, we're on the wrong side of history. People love
Yeah.
those populist statements.
Yes. And social media is full of these PR machines masquerading as entertainment of people giving one person testimonials and trying to tell you about their political views and with videos, many of them doctored by AI. And it's been well shown that those that are antagonistic towards Israel tend to be about 10 to 1 versus those that are sympathetic towards Israel. If we are basically going to become sheep to the PR like voice box in our pocket over time and no longer able to think critically about basic issues such as this and be victim to, the Mamdanis of the world, I think that says a lot about our country.
I think it does say a lot about our country. And I've told you I've engaged in conversation with people who are anti-Zionist, who hate Israel, who love Israel. I mean, I make it a point to talk to all people, and I always try to convince anti-Zionists. No, you're not anti-Zionist. You're like a liberal Zionist, or you you want people to be safe. You want people to have dignity. Of course, so do I. Um, and it's kind of like it's a conversation for naught because either you in when you have a perspective that you will not allow to be infiltrated by truth or by nuance or by question or by anything else, then you're really just talking into an echo chamber. Um, and you can't convince people who don't want to be convinced of something. And so you just go in circles and then they tell you that your politics are corrupt and immoral and all the things, and you sense that they're not just saying it to you because you're Israeli, but also because you're Jewish. And you people have always been like this. On the other side of that, this weekend, and I'm talking about it again because it was moving to me. As I said, I spent the weekend at camp, and they bring in mishlachat, they bring in Israelis who are counselors, and all of them have just finished the army, and they don't want to talk about the army. They especially don't want to talk about the army in America. They don't know what kids have what political opinions. They don't know what staff have what political opinions. And I said, and I have a little bit of chutzpah, and I speak Hebrew, so I asked them. I said,
Yes.
I do. I've listened. And so I said to them, how you guys doing? And they said, we're okay. And I said, no, but like, what have are you out of the army? Are you going back to the army? And they said, it's really hard because we don't want to be in the army anymore, but we want Israel to exist, and we love our country and we love our people. And we're sometimes troubled by the things that we have to encounter, and we're sometimes troubled by the things that we're forced to do, that the political situation has pushed us in. But we try our best to handle every situation with dignity, with respect. And then we have to walk away from that and deal with whatever we've dealt with. And I just wish that there was the ability for people who accuse Israel of the most heinous acts to have conversations with these young men, women too, and just listen to them, hear them, who are the most thoughtful humans, who are holding complexity of emotion, of thought, of ideas, who are not just thinking about moral quandaries, but are literally acting them out.
That's exactly my point.
No.
If you as a young adult are constantly hearing messages about this dystopian, militaristic, evil state which is destroying everything in the world, you might ask a question at a certain point and say, like, is this actually true? Is what I'm hearing true? And is there someone I could talk to know, or is there a book I could read about this? Is there someone I can talk to? Can I go to this place? If you lack that basic curiosity or that basic, again, critical thinking, that you would actually just sit there and say, well, because I've heard the word genocide 100 times, I guess it's genocide. Like that's exactly the issue. Can I say one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Beyond my enmity towards Mamdani over the past week, can I put one more person up there for sort of the Haman of the week? I'd like to put up there for a moment Bezalel Smotrich, which is if 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 the pro-Palestinian movement could put together a Manchurian candidate of an Israeli figure to say all of the things that proves them right and to makes Israelis look bad, it would be him. And I
think he might actually be the Manchurian candidate.
so this week, his jewel this week, I don't know if you heard this one, was that he said at a meeting that he was happy that Iran and the US were fighting it out amongst each other, and that's the best case scenario for Israel, is just to be in a situation where the two of them fight with one another, I guess, and kill one another. Um, it it validates all of these views of Jews of puppet masters, of Jews of being behind the political scene and manipulating the US and wanting to be a part of this. Beyond his statements over we are going to reconquer Gaza and that we are going to basically exile all the 2 million, 3 million people out of Gaza,
make their lives
right, miserable,
yeah.
and that they should starve. Like, if there's like, he gives Tucker Carlson every piece of bulletin board material he will ever need in order to make all of his cases. And speaking of lack of critical thinking, it weighs on me that there's no one in Israel that tells him to shut up.
There's many, but they don't have the platform that he does.
Or that there's enough people in Israel who feel as though we are beyond having to worry about what the world thinks about us. And we are going to become our own zealots in this moment. And we are going to become the most extreme version. We're talking about the moderation of when you actually win public office. Who has been less moderated in their public office than Smotrich?
Well, thank God there's elections this year. No, like really, like I say that religiously and spiritually.
Yes.
Thank God there are elections this year. And it's so interesting that those who are likely to maybe even have a chance of bringing down this government are military leaders. I mean, that's always the case in Israel. The military leaders are always become the politicians often. And those who are challenging the extreme right at the moment are people who really are living the moral complexity of the moment. They want to serve Israel. They want to make Israel strong. But they're also not shying away from the moral issues that Israelis have to deal with when they go to the army. They're not shying away from working with Arabs. They're not shying away from confronting things head on. And so I pray that Israelis make good decision and learn from the populism that we've seen as a trend all over the world, in New York, in the United States as a greater whole, in Israel up until now, and not just win the election and can form a coalition, but then after that can do what Israelis really are begging the government to do, to start taking accountability for the past 3 years and figuring out, okay, we've been in a really terrible war, not just internally, but like we're dealing with the external war of the world, PR war, anti-Semitism, literal existential threat, and we need to be accountable to ourselves. And I think that that's always what's been the magic of the Jewish people, is our ability to not sugarcoat anything, and say, you know what, we got to challenge ourselves.
Can I give you my most pessimistic worry? My
Please.
most pessimistic worry is those most extreme on the right in Israel think to themselves, when we say really extreme things, it turns up the heat on Jews in the diaspora. And if we keep saying more extreme things, the heat will be turned up more in the diaspora. And then those diaspora Jews will all have to move here to Israel, which is what they should be doing anyway. And so if it's an outcome, if it's a consequence of our rhetoric that life outside of Israel is less comfortable for Jews, that's not actually tolerable. That's actually advantageous. And I think that is such a pessimistic view of, of Jewish life in the world at large. And when I hear Smotrich talk, I wonder if that's what's behind his. I mean, the ironic thing, the funny thing would be that if 2 million Reform Jews moved to Israel, suddenly Israeli politics would look a lot different. but sometimes you pray you get what you wish for. Um, so let's end on this. I was in Israel. I was in New York City on Sunday. My wife and I went to the Jewish Museum. We wanted to see an exhibit that was ending there, and we went out to dinner on the Upper East Side. So we were in New York City. We were in the bubble of very Jewish New York City. I wore a kippah.
Mm.
When I went out on the street, I wore a hat over it. When I was in the Jewish Museum, I took the hat off.
Mhm.
When I was in the restaurant, I took the hat off. But when I'm walking around, I have the hat on. And that I know, by the way, that that is a privilege, that there are many Jews out there who do not really choose whether or not they are outward facing as Jews or not, especially those of the Orthodox and the Haredi communities. I have the privilege to sort of mask myself. And yet there's this umbrage, there's this shame that like I'm in New York City and I have to cover my head with my kippah with the hat because I'm worried someone might try to stab me with a screwdriver. And it makes, for me, New York City a place I think about visiting less. But then I worry about, am I giving the Mamdanis of the world a win when that happens too? Isn't that what they'd rather happen? Is just basically the subtle message is Jews get out.
Okay, let me give you one other perspective. I was
Yeah.
in the West Village last night, and Motec was filled to the brim.
Yes.
And with people speaking Hebrew, with people taking on and off their
Right.
kippahs.
But Motec, which on the outside calls it a Mediterranean restaurant, because if they called it an Israeli restaurant, it would be boycotted and defaced. Were there anyone in there? Were there people with kippah? It's not a kosher restaurant, so
No, but I only heard Hebrew.
and you felt comfortable in that. But I mean, hopefully that I think that's kind of the bubble as
I didn't have a
well.
reservation, but I definitely walked by and smiled.
Very good. Well, um, we can hope for the best and keep our ears to the ground for the worst. I think that's sort of the Jewish thing to do, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's okay to change our opinions on things. I think it's okay to give something a chance, to say, I tried. I wanted to believe that they were an ally. I wanted to believe that this narrative could be true. And just like everything, be open to having your opinion change, be open to changing your mind.
So let me ask you this then as a final thing, because I agree. And I think it's a wonderful virtue to have. Is there anything at this point that Mamdani's administration could do to win back your trust? And if so, what would that look like?
I think having a forum, he had a religious forum this week with certain religious leaders. I think coming to a group of rabbis who are explicitly Zionists and sitting down with them and being able to take their questions and have a conversation on the record, not off the record, conversation on the record about what he truly believes about Israel, what he's doing to keep Jews safe, and what conversations he's willing to have, and what element of nuance he's willing to accept, and what he's willing to learn about what it means to be Jewish and in conversation with Israel.
It's interesting. I would want something totally different from him.
What would you want?
I would want him to have a press conference where we say basically this. I realize that I have different political viewpoints from many of the other constituents of our city, but I was elected to be mayor of New York City. I was not elected to be a federal spokesperson or to make federal policy. And my job is to make New York City a better city to live in. And so for the rest of my administration, you are not going to hear me commenting and talking all over the place and demonizing international leaders. What you're going to hear from me is a laser focus on making New York City the best city in the world. And you're going to hear from me about boring things like filling potholes and about paying pensions, and about cleaning up our streets and about making sure that that everyone in New York City has an equal chance and providing the basic social safety network and an education. And I'm going to focus on the actual role of being mayor. I'm not going to play as though I am more than that.
If I heard that, and that would mean that the Messiah is coming, I'd be so on board. And I really hope that he can understand his role, and not the role that he wants to have.
Amen. Thanks, Rabbi.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on In Such a Time. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Landi, or to connect with Temple Bethel of Northern Westchester, visit bethelnw.org or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Temple Bethel NW. Thanks for listening.